All right, people. So Moses Itauma and Derek Chisora are both penciled in for December the 13th. Now, they won't be facing each other. Frank Warren has already, put the kibosh on that. So Itauma will be facing somebody, and you would imagine a, reasonably high contender, given the fact that he's just coming off a win, a conclusive, devastating first-round knockout win over Dillian Whyte. You would imagine he'd be in there with, someone of note at the very least, right? And Chisora, obviously, this is his second final fight in Manchester. I don't believe it will be his final fight. We're hearing names like Bacoli, Zhang, Wilder, White, Miller. We're hearing those kind of names not floating around, knocking about. So let's wait and see there. But this is interesting. I'm seeing on the record boxing reporting on this, and I've seen other people as well say the same. And this is with regards to Moses Itauma. Now, you may know that Moses Itauma is quite highly ranked by the WBO. I think he's number 2, number 1 with the WBO. But he's also very highly ranked by the IBF. He's number 5 with the IBF. Now, originally, there was a final eliminator to be ordered between Frank Sanchez and Efe Ajagba. I think originally it was Filip Hrgovic, but for some reason he's dropped down the rankings. I'm not quite sure why. But it was meant to be between Hrgovic and Sanchez. Then it was meant to be Ajagba and Sanchez. Well, Ajagba has now since declined to go ahead with that rematch. Don't know why. Could be a different. Could be maybe he's going to fight Anthony Joshua. Who again, I'm only saying. I don't know. It could be. I wouldn't actually be matching him with Anthony Joshua. I wouldn't be matching AJ with Efe Ajagba right now, to be honest, which I think that could be very dangerous for AJ if they did. But they're talking about Nigeria or a Ghana date for AJ. Maybe something like that. Who knows? I don't know. Right. So therefore, you would imagine Frank Sanchez and Moses Itauma. And there was a lot of talk that was going to be ordered for the IBF, right? Well, apparently Moses Itauma has rejected an IBF final eliminator. Moses Itauma has turned down a final IBF eliminator against Frank Sanchez, a bout that would have positioned him as the mandatory challenger to Alexander Usyk. Now, this is interesting. This is interesting because in theory, I know Itauma's been mentioning Usyk. I know Turkey has been mentioning that. A lot of people have been mentioning Itauma versus Usyk. For me, I think it's way too early, even in the next year, for him to face Alexander Usyk. But if he had the confidence to go in there, because I believe he is a confident young man, surely, fighting a Frank Sanchez to get a crack at Alexander Usyk would, that'd be the right path to go on. Because originally, his plan was to try and break Mike Tyson's record. He had till May of this year to do it. Didn't happen. Okay. Therefore, in theory, you don't need to keep him on this fast track. You could maybe bring him down to domestic European level if you wanted to, just to get a few more wrinkles into his game and, just have him develop. But you can fast track Itauma. He is tremendously talented, right? Now, turning this down is interesting. Here's the thing, right? And I really got to chuck this in here because it's very strange with the IBF. Now, the IBF are normally quick to expedite their mandatories. So when they call for a final eliminator, it's pretty much, you fight and then, boom, you get your shot. They're very, very quick. They're relentless with their mandatories. And they don't tend to play the favourites game or make things up as they go along, like the WBC do, like the WBA do in particular. Those two, the WBO and the IBF, are normally the two. They're not as clean as the driven snow, make no mistake about that. The IBF and the WBO have done a lot of bad things in the past. They've let belts stay on champions for years. I mean, Errol Spence, God, good Lord, how many years was it where he went without a mandatory? 3-4 years. They didn't call him mandatory for Spence, so that was the IBF. So they're not perfect, far from it, but they are better than the other two. So you would imagine if he was to go in there and face Frank Sanchez, position himself as mandatory for Alexander Usyk, he'd have that crack pretty damn quick. You would imagine Turkey would love it. Frank Warren, they'd all love it. They'd all love the chance to have Itauma be the one to maybe attempt to be the guy to overthrow Alexander Usyk, right? So I turn it down. Now, my logic is, right, and again, this is just me thinking outside the box here, right? Let's look at the IBF rankings, okay? So number 1 is not currently ranked. All right, they don't have a number 1 ranked. But number 2 is Derek Chisora. Now, Chisora fought Otto Wallin back in February. I believe that was some sort of IBF final eliminator, right? It was an eliminator. I don't think it was a final eliminator because at the time, it was still going to be, bear in mind, it was early February. right? It was a couple of weeks before the last crescendo. Now, the last crescendo was meant to have Dubois versus Parker for the IBF Heavyweight Championship of the World. Dubois was champion at the time. Obviously, on fight week, we know what happened. Dubois pulled out with a sickness. Joseph Parker ended up facing Martin Bakole. There was no IBF titles on the line around it, and it was for Parker's WBO interim title. Okay, so he was willing to forego the WBO for the IBF. Didn't happen. We now are where we are, right? Now, originally what was going to happen was Bakole was going to face F.A. Ajagba. He still did on the undercard of Canelo Skull. But originally that was going to be a final eliminator for the IBF to determine the mandatory challenger. So given the fact that Bakole was willing to forego that to take the Parker payday on 48 hours notice, no training, we all know what happened there. Basically it was announced that Chisora would be mandatory. So as far as I was aware, Chisora is now mandatory, right? So if this is a second mandatory, because they can do that, they have done it. I think the WBC have done it in the past, where they've had like a mandatory and then another final eliminator for the second mandatory, but you're going to have to wait maybe another year before you get said crack. I think they did something like that with Dylan White when Dominic Brazil was mandatory. I think they did something akin to that. It's really weird, it's really convoluted, but I think they have done that in the past. If that is the case, then I think it does kind of make sense, because Frank Sanchez that's a banana skin for an Itauma, because Frank Sanchez is a big puncher. He's definitely got power. He's fast. He's very technically gifted, very defensively minded. He's a very good fighter, as Frank Sanchez. And people would bring up, oh yeah, but look what happened to him when he fought Ajay Kabayel. Listen, you don't even try and tell me that was a full 100% Frank Sanchez. It wasn't. Frank Sanchez, a fighter coming from Cuba, defected to America. How much money has he made as a pro? How much money has he made as a pro? He fought Junior Fa in one of those Saudi shows, knocked him out in 7-8 rounds. And then he fought Ajay Kabayel, and he was clearly injured because he was getting the bag. And he was willing to fight injured, knowing he was probably never going to win, because it's not enough just to fight injured. It's the fact that he's a fighter who relies on his legs, and it's clear he didn't have one of the legs there, you know? So I think a rematch would go maybe the same, but it'd be a lot more competitive. So turning that down, I don't necessarily begrudge him it if it means, if it means you have to wait for Chisora to maybe pick up a belt or fight. You see what I mean? So if that's something like it, then maybe I can understand why they turn it down. But saying that, if you want a world title shot, you want to position yourself into a good position. Are you going to get that with the WBO? Are you going to fight Joseph Parker, Fabio Wardley winner? I don't know. You look at the rankings. So if Sanchez is going to be fighting a final eliminator, well, you'd have to go down the rankings. And the next in line is Richard Torres. And then below him is Daniel Dubois. Then it's Filip Hrgovic. Then Jared Anderson, Michael Hunter, Martin Bakole, Bakadir Jalilov, Peter Kadru. I've never heard of him. I have to just be honest, I never heard of him. Lawrence Okoli, number 14 ranked. This is where the rankings are so stupid. How can you have one fighter? I think Okoli is number 2 or number 1 with the WBC, right? And bear in mind, he's done literally nothing at heavyweight. And he's he's barely in the rankings. He's 14 out of 15 in the rankings with the IBF. For me, I just look and just think, my God, how do you have such weird rankings? How do you have one fighter so high with one sanctioned body and so low with the other? But yeah, those are my thoughts on this. It's an interesting one, because Itauma is talented. I look at that style on paper and I think, that could be interesting. I think Itauma is faster than Frank Sanchez, definitely, certainly is. Probably hits harder too. But Sanchez will find Itauma. I mean, Itauma, I don't think as an amateur, certainly maybe as an amateur and a pro, wouldn't ever have been in there with anyone as technically good and as sharp, because he's a very sharp puncher, Frank Sanchez, when he lets the shots go, as Frank Sanchez. Again, when you get into the upper echelons of the heavyweight division, there's a lot of dangerous styles in there. Because I look at I'll give you an example, right? I look at someone like a Derek Chisora and I think Itauma could be him. Richard Torres Jr., yeah, I think Itauma could be him. Hrgovic, yeah, probably could be him. Dubois, maybe. Depends what kind of Dubois we have after the Usyk debacle. Anderson, yeah, I think he beats him. Michael Hunter, this version, probably beats him, yeah. Bakole beats him. Bakadir Jalilov, no. Don't know who, again, I've never seen that Peter guy fight. Okoli, yeah, probably could beat him. Styles make fights. Sanchez is a horrible style for someone like an Itauma, you would imagine. So maybe, again, I don't know. I'm only thinking out loud here. But I wonder, has it something to do with the fact that Chisora, last I checked, was still mandatory? So if he fights Frank Sanchez for a mandatory position, is that mandatory after Chisora gets his crack? In which case, you could be waiting a year. So those are my thoughts on this. Let me know yours in the comment section below. But it is interesting. Itauma turns down Frank Sanchez. Unless he has something better lined up. And let's just really quickly, just before I go, just check the WBO rankings really quickly. I'll just give them a quick look here and see have they been updated. We want, where's the ranking? Where's the category? We want heavyweight organization WBO. We're going to do it from right now. What month are we in? September. Let's have a look, see. Yeah, Itauma number 1 ranked. So, yeah, that's interesting. You would imagine, well, in theory, you would imagine if Alexander Usyk vacates and Parker becomes, well, to say the winner of Parker Wardley becomes full champion, they'd probably name Itauma as number 1 contender. And I know some people would be saying, well, why would they do that? Liam, he's not fought a final eliminator. Anthony Yarde's had 2 mandatory fights as WBO mandatory challenger, and he hasn't fought 1 eliminator. They will do it for a Frank Warren fighter. Make no mistake about that. Make no mistake about that. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if Moses Itauma fights on December the 13th and for some reason we hear, oh yeah, by the way, that was a final eliminator for the WBO, even though you fought probably, I don't know who he's fighting, but let's just say he fought, don't know, just name someone. How is Johnny Fisher 15th ranked by the... Hang on, wait a minute. Johnny Fisher is ranked 15 by the WBO and Dave Allen isn't ranked. That's crazy. That's wild. What? Yo. He's eligible for a fight against Usyk. Good lord, I shouldn't laugh. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comment section below. As always, if you could, people, I hope you enjoyed it. Smash the like button if you could. Hit subscribe, of course, as always, if you haven't already. Hope you're enjoying the mic, because I'm liking it as well. Peace.